All right, everybody, welcome back to the What Worked For Me podcast. Today I have Kurd, who is an awesome guest. He's lost about 130 pounds. I got a chance to talk to him briefly before this, and he said he might have done that two or three times at this point in his life. Expert in powerlifting and strength sports, also had some experience in bodybuilding. I'm really excited to get into his whole story. Kurd, is there anything else you'd like to introduce yourself with?
No, I'm just pretty awesome. I think that's a pretty good start, Michael. Thank you for
All
having me on the
right,
show and stuff. Appreciate it.
perfect.
Appreciate it.
So, I know right before we talked about this, you said you got almost all the way up to 400 pounds. Um,
Yeah.
but nobody's born at 400 pounds, so there had to have been, some type of journey that got you up to that point. So let's go back, as early as you want and start figuring out, where did the weight gain start, and what were some of those habits that, maybe got you to be bigger than you should have been originally.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, I'm 56 years old, turning 57 in a few weeks. So this is my third, I call it Curd 3.0. So this is the third rendition of me losing a massive amount of weight after gaining a massive amount of weight. So those, like you said, they don't happen by accident. At the end of the day, I've always struggled with self-esteem and confidence. If you look at me now at 280 some pounds, hard to believe that I would be struggling with confidence and self-esteem. But when you looked at me before, you could definitely see it, right? Um, so I've always been really good at getting things started. I'm really good with people. I'm really, that person that I have a lot of passion and purpose. But where I've run into problems is just some of the inner demons, as I call it, the mental sabotaging, getting tired. And then when we get tired, our minds follow that. And then typically for me, I would turn to food and I would turn to alcohol. So a plate of nachos doesn't seem that bad. A pitcher of beer doesn't seem that bad. But then when it's 4 or 5 nights in a row, and that's, after a long day, and I mean, I'm in the gym business, right, at this time, and I've been in fitness and stuff for 30 years, so I'm the guy that should look jacked, but obviously I wasn't, personifying that. Now I was a power lifter. I got into powerlifting out of college because as I spoke earlier, farm kid, 240 hit the college scene, wanted to lose a few pounds for the girls for confidence and stuff, and started training. I could deadlift three plates, 315 pretty quick, squat 315 pretty quick, because on the farm you do a lot of physical labor. But nothing on the farm was a push. So the bench press for me, I struggled with. And I don't like to struggle with anything. And I remember sitting, as I talked earlier, in the gym, and this little bodybuilder guy comes in, lays down beside me while I just racked 100 pounds, having done it poorly for 6 reps. And he pulls out three plates, hits it for like three or four, racks it, goes outside and has a smoke. And I remember wondering, how is that possible? I'm big, he's small, he's strong, I'm weak. And that's how I kind of got into the bench press, because I got very angry and I got very passionate about it. Fast forward a bunch of years later, I'm benching, I'm competing. I benched almost 600 pounds in competition raw. And I was doing over 500 at a time where very few people were doing 500. Now everybody and their dog does it. But
Don't
back
worry,
then,
I've never gone close to 500, so you're
well, it's
you're
funny, because you see the social media only shows you the peak of everything. So everyone seems to be benching 500. Everyone's deadlifting 900 pounds. But in reality, very few people hit three plates, let alone four or five.
right.
But you don't know that because you're in the middle of your own battle, right?
And I'd love to
So
talk.
yeah, so that,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. I'd love to talk about your powerlifting and all that in just a second. So you said
Yep.
starting out, even by the time you kind of got into college, so into high school, you were about 240. Um,
Yeah.
and so you just kind of grew up a bigger guy, and you think the main part of that was just kind of your emotional tie to food, that was the thing that kind of got you started with the original weight gain.
Yeah, at 240, I was actually at 6'2". I was a pretty solid kid. Again, a lot of farm work, a lot of physical work and stuff. Had a little bit of a belly on me, but that wasn't the start of that. That was just, a well-fed farm kid that did a lot of physical labor and stuff. And genetically, I'm gifted where I can build muscle and hold size really well. If you look at
Right.
me when I was that age, I look tiny compared to what I look like now, but it's just, I was a big farm kid. The food and stuff like that really came into play when I was older, when I was having to deal with some life stuff and some struggles. Not the best home life to grow up in, and then on my own at a very early age. So a lot of struggles there and trying to find who I was. the big funny guy was who I was and stuff. And then, started, didn't really drink until I was in college, but then I really liked it, because you felt good, you felt calm, you felt, confidence came up and stuff like that. So all of a sudden it was
Oh,
easier to
liquid
chat and
courage.
stuff. Liquid courage, liquid dance lessons, and liquid courage, right? So those habits started forming back then as well, too. So, but I trained a lot, so I was doing pretty good. It's only later on in life when I started to get into other aspects of life, when things weren't working out the way I wanted them to, that it was easier to turn to a bowl of ice cream. And it was easier to, I never could drink one beer, I'd have a pitcher, right? And the life of the party and everyone happy and that kind of stuff. So the reality is just I started forming some really bad habits to deal with some things that, ideally I wasn't equipped with to deal with properly at a younger age. And then by the time you start to figure that out, you've got a lot of momentum going. You've got a lot of habits going and stuff, right?
Right.
So always hard to make those changes. Always hard to change how we think. Always hard to change our daily activities when we're not at our best, when we are tired, when we are depressed, when we are lonely, right? That kind of thing. And you can be in a room full of people and still be lonely, right? That's the
Right.
whole part about the mental aspect of it and stuff. So those were where a lot of those habits kind of continued. And because I got into the bench press and I started becoming known for the bench press, it didn't really matter how much I weighed, right? As long as I was strong, right? That
Right.
kind of stuff. So if I talked about the bench press, everybody listened. But if I talked about weight loss, even though I was factually correct, I didn't personify that. Nobody listened. So I just gravitated to what was easy. And being the big bench, powerful guy that likes beer was who my character became, who my avatar was, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, Kurt, super strong bench guy, likes his beer. Well, I had an identity now. And that's kind of where I fell into that trap and then just got better at drinking, got better at eating, right? Because
Yeah.
you did it more often.
And so it was kind of one of those, I think this is a slippery slope, especially like heavyweight athletes get in, where it's like you're naturally big and you get a little bit of positive reinforcement for being bigger. And then being bigger gives you a little bit more and it kind of goes and goes and goes. And then I lived that same situation multiple times myself. When did you start to realize like, hey, maybe this is too much? Was that all the way up at when you got close to 400 or did it happen a couple times before that?
It was, I'll be, if I'm truly honest, it was always an underlying current. I knew I wasn't happy being overweight. I always wanted to be like Arnold. I remember opening up those magazines. Again, I'm 56 now. So, when I was hitting the gym in my early 20s, 30 years ago, there wasn't internet. It was all magazine based. Arnold was still in the magazines. He had just come out with Conan the Barbarian and Terminator and stuff like that. And he was still jacked. And deep down, I wanted that. I really, really wanted that. That superhero look, that Conan, that powerful thing. And maybe it was part of just, not having a great life growing up. I wanted a hero. I wanted to be my own hero. So I gravitated towards that. And I looked powerful and looked confident. And I was attracted to that. So deep down, I always wanted to be jacked. I always wanted to be muscular. I always wanted to be lean. I always wanted that. But I think the bench thing really took off, and that was the easy road, right? That kind of stuff. I was successful at it, which was also powerful. So, truth be known, I love being strong, don't get me wrong, but deep down, I always would envy the guy who had the abs, had the big arms, had the traps and stuff like that. And I would hate them. And what I was really hating was myself. And that's really the honest truth. I've always wanted to be the version I am now.
And I think that's always there. I as much as I know some athletic endeavors make us that big, I don't think anyone feels great at 300 plus pounds. It's a lot to carry, both mentally and
Hot and
physically.
sweaty all the time.
Yeah. So, what was the point when you started realizing, okay, I've gone kind of too far with this, and I need to start working on bringing my size back down and maybe getting into a more overall healthy way of approaching fitness and not just, bigger and stronger is always better.
I'd say like let's talk about the current rendition because I've gone through it a couple times and they were always after big life issues, a major breakup with someone that was special, a failure somewhere in life or business. This one started just about around COVID. I had closed the facility that I had just before COVID. I'd gotten too big, too much going on. I couldn't handle it. I'd been sober. I've been sober. I'm sober 10 years now. So I've been sober about 5 years then. And that was starting to become a concern that I wasn't gonna if I didn't change some of the pressures, I wasn't going to be able to maintain my sobriety. And to me, that sobriety was like the number one thing I've ever achieved that's changed my life the most. So it's probably that thing that pulled me out of things because I did not want to lose that one thing that I was able to achieve. So
I'm sure that
COVID
probably
hits,
helped
and
overall with health a lot. How, if you don't mind, if we can get talk into it, how are you able to approach getting sober? I think that's a major step for a lot of people is to be able to
yeah,
set.
it's huge. Again, same thing. I knew I had a drinking problem for a long time. I wasn't that guy that would drink and fight, although I did fight. I wasn't that guy that would,
Luckily, you're kind of a big guy to be punching
I
in
was
the
a bouncer guy. I was that kind of stuff.
face.
Right? A lot of internal anger, right? Um, but I wasn't abusive at home, but I was disconnected. I wasn't, harsh with my family, but I wasn't present when I drank. Um, so I realized that I had to make some changes, or else I was going to lose something, obviously my family, which is something else that was very important to me. So I'd thrown it around for a couple of years, and then one day I just said, you know what? I got drinking, and I went to my first meeting. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell anybody. I really kept it. And I'm a guy that tells everything. I'm very open on social media. I like to tell my story. I like to be my authentic self. But this one thing I kept very quiet. And that's how I knew it was really important to me. So I went to my first meeting. And I'll tell you right now, I've been through a lot in life. That meeting was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. Like going in for that white chip. And I talk about it when I give talks on it. It was the single biggest, scariest moment of my life. And I've been through a lot. But that thing really, really changed me because I knew in doing that, I was stepping to another side that I had no idea what it was going to be like. I had no idea who I was going to be like. I had no roadmap, and it was truly like stepping into the great unknown. But I knew I had to do it. I was 6 months sober before I told my wife. I wanted to be sure that I was on the right track. I wanted to be sure this was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be sure I could handle it first. And when I told her, she was surprised. She knew I drank a lot, and I'd given up drinking a few times for a while for training and things like that. So that didn't throw her off, right? But when I told her that I've gone to meetings and I've been 6 months sober and I showed her the chips, very emotional, very powerful. And then I didn't tell the world until I had 1 year in. And 1 year in, I came out to the whole world, social media and stuff like that, because I like the power of social contract. But I also believe that one of my purposes in life is to lead and to help and help other people, solve problems. I like to do that. And I'll tell you, when I put that out there, the flood of response that I got, both publicly, online, and private messages was overwhelming. All positive. People reached out to me that I had no idea they were celebrating 2 years, 5 years, 25 years. It really, really was something special. And to me, it was, I consider that date, October 2nd, more important than my own birthday because I actually chose this date. This is the date where I made a change for myself and stuff. So very, very powerful. So to me, that's really how that happened. Unfortunately, that was good, but I didn't change some of my other habits. So I went to food more, right? And I went
Right.
to other aspects and stuff like that because there's a lot of things to deal with mentally and emotionally, and takes
So you kind of
time.
switch one vice for another. I think that can be
When you have an ism, you're prone to any other ism, right?
a
So alcoholism, overeating, all those things, they all can just one can take the place of the other because we're trying to fill a void, right?
right.
And then it's not until COVID and things like that where I realized that I had to make some significant changes because I didn't want to jeopardize my sobriety. I turned back into training. And near the end, my last facility, I would train, I would bench on Tuesdays, and I was in working the business so hard, I didn't even want to work out. I didn't want to train people. I didn't want to be around that, other than the fact that I had to make sure the lights stayed on. I did what was going, had to be done, but I was miserable. I really, really was. And COVID all of a sudden forced me to be at home, with nothing to do. So I slept for like a month because I was just so exhausted and burnt out. And then I woke up one day and the same thing. I've always been good at, hey, you got to do something here. You've got to make the next change. What's the next thing that you want to do? Sat down, did some self-inventory and stuff. And, at the time I'm 50, in my 50s. And I'm like, runway's getting a little shorter. What are the things that you want to do that you haven't done? And it always comes back to bodybuilding. So I went into my garage. I had a whole bunch of pieces of equipment left over and did a bicep tricep workout, as I talked about earlier, the bro workout,
Right.
right? Get a little pump in the thighs, a little pump in the tris. It was like a 20-minute workout. I was exhausted because I was 398 pounds. And but I felt good about it. And I said, you know what, tomorrow I'll go back in, I'll do shoulder. So I really went back into with the expectation, one short workout a day. Just get in there, get a little pump going, and get out. No big expectations. As you know yourself, having competed at a high end and stuff like that, if we stop and we get back into it, we put these crazy expectations like we should be where we left off, in the
Right.
peak of our training. So it's unrealistic. It's a ton of pressure. And if anything, it'll drive us away from doing it as
Yep.
opposed to walking out there a little more excited and say, can't wait till tomorrow. So small daily wins, small little victories were
Yeah,
super
let's
important.
talk about that because that's something a lot of people get caught in, right? When you go from a really high level of activity, you take a break or you get injured and you come back,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's not even worth it. What what were you able to do mentally to accept the fact like, hey, this is where I'm at and make it worth, make it something you wanted to do again? Because that's something a lot of people get caught up on.
Yeah, yeah, they get caught up in the past. They romanticize where they were before, and often we don't remember quite the way it really was. We remember things the way we wish it was, or we wish we were today and stuff. I really sat down and I broke down things into just being very pragmatic. And for me, I'm a very emotional guy, so I worked really hard on taking the emotion out and starting to become more stoic about things. And said, listen, if I came to me and said, this is what I want to do, what would I tell them? Right? And I'd say, work out every day, start to clean up your food, right? That kind of thing, work on some mental processes. So from that, I created a thing I call the 4 daily non-negotiables. I live by this, and it's highly effective. And basically, the four principles are early on in the day, as soon as possible, we focus on food mastery, we focus on exercise, we focus on mindset, so whether that's journaling, praying, whatever it is, right? And for personal presentation. And to me, I've worked really hard to hit those as early as I can every day. And sometimes those are 4 wins. Those are 4 big wins. And sometimes it may be the only wins we have for the whole day. But they're
Yeah.
the 4 wins that we have total control of. That's the only thing. We can only control ourselves, control our actions and control our thoughts. So what I really did is I tried to boil it down to that today, to that. And because of COVID, I had so much time, by 9 in the morning, I had those 4 things done. And I'm like, well, I'm up now. Let's do something, right? That
Yeah,
kind
and
of
let's
thing.
let's take
Really
some
set
time to
the
break
stage.
down each one of those because I think all those good. So
Yeah.
the first one's nutrition.
Yeah. So
So
food mastery, yeah,
yeah,
it
let's
was really okay.
how do you
Come up
define
with
that and like what would you do? Like give me an example of how you do that personally.
So what I did is I said, okay, listen, this is how many calories I think I should be taking based on my knowledge and stuff. I became a bodybuilder. I said, listen, if I want to weigh this much, this is what I need. This is my daily calorie intake I need. I want to get into a deficit. Okay, well, let's go old school. Let's go chicken and rice and broccoli and stuff. Let's figure that out. So I created 4 meals, figured out the calories, the proteins, the macros is all the kids say today. And I just wrote it out, put it on the fridge. My current one is still in the fridge now. And then I sat there and I said, okay, so part of food mastery would be figuring out my calories. Number 2 would be food prep. So make sure I have enough chicken ready, enough rice ready, enough broccoli ready ahead of time in bigger containers. And then before I went to bed every night, it was okay, break down your 4 meals and put them in smaller containers. Meal 1, meal 2, meal 3. And I mean, I'm at home, but I still insisted on doing it so that when I open up the fridge the next morning, there's meal 1, there's meal 2. And what that did is it really worked on taking the emotion of eating out. It took away the what am I going to eat now? Which the moment we do that, we're like, I think it's going to be nachos
Yeah.
because that's what I'm thinking about, as opposed to because nothing's ready. So for me, that was the food mastery. Start doing that. Get on top of that. It was hard, obviously, eating, going from eating 4 or 5 thousand calories a day to going down to, let's say, 2,500 or whatever I started with. So yeah, a little hungry at first, but when it's whole food, as you know, you're more satiated. You don't feel as hungry. In fact, sometimes the fourth meal, like, oh, I'm kind of full.
Right.
But what I really liked about that is it really made things so much simpler and took the emotion out of things. And I really sat there. I remember like a week or two into it, I'm like, why the hell did I wait so long to do it? This is so much easier and simpler. I go to Walmart, 2 trays of chicken, a couple bags of broccoli, bag of rice. I'm done. Right now, I'm saving hundreds of dollars. There's so many cool things that happened to it because of that. But that was it. That was my main thing. So that was what I called food mastery. And then I knew that if the weight gain or weight loss didn't happen enough or wasn't happening, I could just make adjustments and stuff. But I had something to adjust. I had a
Right.
baseline. right? And as you know, without a baseline, if we don't know how many calories we're consuming, we have nothing to adjust, right?
Right.
So it was really taking that emotion out of it and just being, this is how we're going to do it every day. And that would be a huge win for me, is just, being on top of my food when food was chaos for so long.
And it sounds like that kind of leads into this one of the other pillars that you're talking about, because one of them is kind of a mental or spiritual, like mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
So
So
you
the
kind of took the
mindset one was
emotions out
number
of
one.
food. I know sometimes when we take the emotions out of food or take the emotions, I think you just kind of call it an ism, right? Where we have one of those psychological crutches. We're left with this pile of emotions
Void.
that we're trying to
Yeah.
figure out. How did you manage the emotions after you took food out of it?
I really had to focus on I committed to focusing on the wins. I really did. I focused on, hey, listen, if I do this, I'm in the right direction. And I'll be honest, I used YouTube a lot. I would throw on bodybuilding videos, motivation videos, and stuff. I would have that playing all the time. Like I really worked on programming my mind so that I didn't leave room for the negative thoughts to get in. I didn't leave room for the demons to get in. I figured that, if I got in early enough and programmed what was in my head to start the day, I had a better chance of having a successful day and stuff. It doesn't mean that, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, oh, I'm a fat piece of poop. It didn't happen. It did, but I was really working hard to build momentum to say, you may be, but look at what you're doing now. Right. And I've got this wicked pump from yesterday's workout. That was the other thing, that feeling the muscles again was really exciting. And it was just a physical anchoring that really helped me out a lot as well.
I'm sure that really does help. You brought the 2 o'clock thing, and myself included, that can be a notorious time. And I think everyone kind of has either a time of day or maybe just some low points that can be reoccurring. How did you approach those and start to navigate those where it wasn't just something that derailed you, right? You hit those points where your mind kind of gets weak. How did you get back on the horse and kind of keep going once you were mentally weak?
So the hard part about that time was because we were knee deep in COVID. So there just wasn't a lot of things. Like in Canada, they shut everything down. It was crazy. So like, excitement for the day was going to Walmart and standing 6 feet apart to get your broccoli. And I mean, I would literally like, all right, I would buy enough to last for today and I would go back tomorrow and I'll go to give me some sort of outing and some break up the day and stuff. Like I really tried to fill up those voids so I wouldn't run into them, right? And those are some very challenging times, right? To just sit there and be alone with your thoughts. We run away from that a lot, and that was the other thing I really tried to sit there and work on, is that just don't run away from them. If this is how you're feeling, feel it and try to understand why you're feeling it, right? Not easy, right? That kind
Oh,
of stuff. There was days where, the Oreos did win out and stuff like that, but there was less and less of that along the way. But that is the hard part. That is when someone comes up to you and you've seen that they've made the transformation. Um, and you've gone through it yourself. It's almost like you have that nod when the guy walks in the room or girl walks in the room and and you nod. That nod means something because I get you. I walk the
yeah.
path, respect, right? That kind of thing. So that was a big thing, is going through that fight. And I really would sit there sometimes and say, dude, you're in a fight for your life. This is it. This is what you got to do. And you know what? You've had all the cheat meals preloaded, front end loaded for 20 years and 15 years, right? You don't need another cheat meal. You've had them all ahead of time, right? That kind of thing. And it was about really getting hard with myself and just saying, hey, listen, if you want to make these changes, it's gonna suck. But the suck that you're going through now, feeling 398 pounds, that world of hard and suck was the worst.
Right.
So I really had to sit there and negotiate with myself off and say, this suck is a lot better than the suck I'm coming from. This hard is a lot better than the hard I'm coming from, because that hard hasn't served me well in the last 20 years at all.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, nutrition, you have kind of the mental aspect. The other one was exercise, which I think we touched on a decent
Daily
amount,
exercise.
getting some type of
Yeah.
exercise and starting
Yep.
small, progressively overload, kind of the basic
Yep.
things. What was the fourth one again that you talked about?
Personal presentation.
Personal presentation. Let's dive into that. What does that look like for you, and how do you use that tool?
So personal presentation for me, and again, especially in COVID, right, where most people, if they were working from home, they were doing this in front of a TV, a computer screen. So they had a shirt on and sitting in their underwear and stuff like that, because it didn't matter, right? So I always liken it to this. If you think about your first date with someone, if you think about a job interview, if you think about your first day at an event or you're going out, we dress up, we clean, we trim the beard, we comb the hair, we shower, right? Why? Because it's important to us and we feel good. We feel good when we're looking good, right? That kind of thing. And to me, that was very, very powerful. So personal presentation means that as I lost the weight, I would change the clothes I wore to show the body more. I wouldn't hide behind a 5XL hoodie because I wasn't a 5XL anymore. I wasn't a 4XL. I wasn't a 3XL. And as those changed, I was excited, like, oh, I'm wearing a 2XL now, that kind of stuff. But you just, for me, it was a treat every day like it's an interview, treat every day like it's special and that it matters because it does, right? And that was it. And that's why adding those four together just kept building up and stuff. So I didn't care if I didn't leave the house. I had a clean pair of jeans on or a clean pair of track pants on. I had a clean t-shirt on. I wasn't wearing tank tops yet because I was nowhere close to where I wanted to see myself in the tank top, but I
Right.
was wearing a better fitting t-shirt, a better fitting hoodie and stuff, a clean t-shirt, a clean hoodie and stuff. The beard was in check and stuff. And those things really, really mattered, right? They added to the next level. And here's the reality is, and this is hard for a lot of people, I think, to feel and understand, is that when you're at your worst physically, it's because you're at your worst mentally. And we put that vibe out there, we put that image out there, we put that energy out there, and the world treats us to that level. That's the reality of it, right? So we don't sit there and we want to sit there and say it's things like fat shaming and it's this and that. It doesn't matter what name you give to it. You're telling the world when you step out, how you look and how you present yourself, you're telling the world how you feel about yourself. And the world's going to treat you to that level. Doesn't matter. The world's cruel. The world doesn't give a shit. And at the end of the day, we put ourselves in that position. And it's only us that we have to blame at the end. We're not 10 anymore. We can't blame our parents, right? That kind of stuff. We're 20, 30, 40. There's a point where we have to take responsibility. It doesn't matter what happened to us. We're responsible for how we deal with things going forward. And to me, that was the biggest thing to sit there and say, listen, until I feel that way on the inside, I'm not going to look that way on the outside. And until I look, to those two are congruent, the world's not going to treat me any different than I treat myself. And that was a big, big, hard lesson for me to sit there and firmly grasp. But when I did it, it changed everything.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I really, really like that. So let's start talking about the transformation itself. You start at 398. How
Yeah.
fast did you start losing weight?
So the advantage I had is that 30 plus years doing this stuff and understanding this stuff, I had the knowledge to apply right away. So I don't know, I'm going to say 30 pounds in the first month, no problem. 20 pounds a month after that, no problem, because I was
Oh,
attacking
super
from,
fast. Really, really
yeah,
fast. You were
because I was
cruising.
attacking from the nutritional deficit. I was eating the right foods. I was doing the right amount of exercise. So everything was changing and stuff. Plus I was just driven. I was just like, this is it. This is the time to do it and stuff. I'd had enough, right? It's like one of those movies, where the hero has gotten beaten down and he finally, the journey, and he says, okay, now the whole movie is about the journey to the final battle. And I really thought of it that way, and I still do. But it was taking all the knowledge that I had and saying, listen, what if you used it? And that's
Right.
where things got really accelerated, right? And there's, you know what? And this is where I get a little, the knowledge that we have just at our fingertips now is incredible, right? So it's not a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of application, and it's a lack of drive and direction and just deciding that you're going to make the changes, right? Because the knowledge is out there, you know it, I know it and stuff, and easier now than ever. It's why aren't we applying the knowledge? So it's more internal than anything else.
Yeah. Let I really agree with you. I honestly think most dietary strategies would work if someone would just do them. I mean, I'm not someone who fully believes in high carb or low carb or carnivore or anything. I think if you apply something, it'll probably work. The average American and Canadian, for in this matter, probably are not super healthy, so there's probably not too much
Well,
shift.
we're applying the opposite, right? And that doesn't
Yeah.
work either. We're applying it.
So
We're applying that.
and I really agree with you that it's not usually a lack of knowing what to do, but being able to do it. It sounds like you acquired knowledge for, 20 plus years. What steps did you have to take to start turning that knowledge into actions and then eventually like wisdom of like, I know this, instead of thinking this is how it should work, to actually be like, I've been through this, this is how it works.
So, like I said earlier in my life, I've lost the weight a few times. I've lost 50 pounds, I lost 70 pounds and stuff like that. And it always came back to me, just get back to the gym. I fell in love with training when I was in college. I loved it. I really, really did. And every time I look at how my life progressed, as things were going really well, eventually I would derail it, and demons would come forth, my the inner turmoils would win, and I hadn't addressed those things. So I would always start to veer off from training. I'd always start to veer off from eating better. Because I got caught up in, well, this is really cool, and I like drinking, and I like the girls, and I like this, and that kind of stuff, and that's a lot of fun, right? And next thing you know, 40 pounds comes back pretty quick because you're drinking and eating nachos and chasing girls, and you're not in the gym as much, right? So every time I look back when I made a major change in my life, it always was when I got back to the gym and got back to the fact that I just love working out. I just love the feel. I love the pump. I love the burn. I like being strong. And when I just became to the point where I said, this is who I am, and who I really want to be is the highest level of this, right? And not being that person is what really ate away at me. It's just not being the version who I'm supposed to be. And it was, when I look back at, how I say, the world treats you based on what you present to the world, I'm the only one to blame for that, right? I tell people this all the time. If you want to know exactly how you think about yourself and what your standards are and your boundaries are, look in the mirror. The mirror will tell you exactly what you truly believe. The mirror will tell you exactly what you do on a regular basis. The mirror doesn't care, right? It's going to reflect back onto what you're showing. And that's really the reality of it and stuff. So if you don't like what's happening in the mirror, you have to go inside, because it's the inside. It's what you're thinking, it's what you're believing, but it's really the standard that you've decided to hold yourself to. And then, it always gets a little weird sometimes you think about it, but if you love yourself enough, you'll do these things that you need to do for yourself. And that's where I think a lot of us have run into trouble, that have gone into weight gain and self-destructive behavior, is that at some point we just stopped or aren't capable of loving ourselves to the highest level. Because if we love something, you love someone in your life, you want only the best for them, right? But until we do that for ourselves, we're just limited. And that really reflects on the tough days. The tough days are tougher because we don't love ourselves enough to say, too bad, go downstairs and have breakfast and get your ass out to the gym because Mickey loves you, that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
Right? Yeah.
So you touched on something a couple times about this podcast, and I think it's important. You brought up the fact that you kind of had this shift from, the big guy who loves beers and nachos and bench press to, this
Yeah.
person of you are now. And I think identity can be this trap or a really great tool that can either
Mhm.
basically destroy us or really help us bridge the gap to that next level.
Make us or break
How,
us.
what steps did you take to remove parts of you and those identities that were holding you back? Because that's something I think a lot of people fail. Like they've been the big guy for so long, that's just who they are. Or, you know,
Yeah.
how did you separate yourself away from those?
I think quite honestly, it was just acquiring enough wins in the other areas to build momentum and confidence, to have enough of a leap of being able to take that leap of faith, is to the point that if I want to be this version I've never been before, I'm gonna have to walk a path that I haven't quite got to yet. I haven't been on that side. So what I really focus on was, losing 20 pounds, you feel good. Losing 40 pounds, you feel good. Moving better, you feel good, right? Your arms are showing more. Your chest is coming out. All these things that were building momentum and wins for me, I was using them as basically ammunition and power to take that next level step, to go, okay, I've got enough that I'm gonna have to take that leap of faith to get there, and rely on the fact that I am capable. I've lost all this weight. Well, that's an amazing accomplishment, right? So if I can do that amazing accomplishment, I can do another amazing accomplishment. So the other four things I use in my life to problem solve is I break everything down, any issue we have to deal with, into a struggle. And then once we have a struggle or a problem, we have to come up with a plan, and we have to put that plan in action. I call that perseverance or persevering. And then as we start to get through that, then we have success. And then once we have success, we have inspiration, right? So I basically go with struggle, persevere, succeed, and inspire. But the person we're inspiring is ourselves. The world around us might sit there and say, hey, I like what you're doing. That's amazing. Can you help me? That's wonderful. But really, those four words for me are basically what I try to do anytime I run into something I need to work on, is I break it down into, what's my problem? What's the struggle? Right? And now, okay, well, I need to earn more money, or I need to cut debt, or whatever it is. Okay, well, what's the action? What's the plan? Once I have that plan, persevere, show up every day. right? And then once things start to happening, we have success. Let's recognize that success. Let's enjoy that success. And then it inspires us to look forward. So, well, what's next? And if I can handle this and I can figure out this, I can definitely figure out the next thing and to go back and forth with that. So to me, those are the other four principles I like to try to use. And I have to remind myself sometimes every day, sometimes on a Thursday, that this is how we handle that, right? But it's the wins, it's the small wins, build up the wins, and then say, okay, I'm ready for the next step. I'm ready for that next challenge. And knowing what that challenge really is, being honest with ourselves. Very hard to be honest with ourselves because a lot of times where our honesty is and where we want us to be, it's pretty far. So small wins, small wins, small wins. So, like yourself, you've lost a lot of weight. If you'd have turned around and said, okay, starting today, I'm losing 120 pounds. Well, that's a daunting goal. That's a long ass goal. And there's a lot of room for side steps in that goal. But if you sit down and say, I'm going to drop 20 pounds, well, that's a smaller goal. That means every day matters, every week matters, every workout matters because that 20 is only that far away. And then when you
Yep.
win 20, then and so by breaking it down into smaller pieces, we get to that 120,
I really like what you said because basically the idea of succeeding in the new identity is what gives you the faith to let go of that old identity.
right?
So
Absolutely.
you brought up how your weight has fluctuated a lot, and anybody who's lost weight knows you're going to regain weight. That's part of how it goes. How do you handle kind of setbacks or regain with weight or any aspect in health?
So I have a couple things that I use. I have a one mental rule that I have is that I'll never let myself go over 300 pounds again. Uh, Once you've been over 300, spending, I'm 56 years old. I bet you I spent 20 plus years, 350 pounds or more. There's a reset point. There's a point where your body's just comfortable there. It's just what you know. So it's very easy to get back to that until you spend a lot of time at a much lower weight. There's some science behind it. I just can't, quote it at this time.
No worries. Let's
But at the end of the day, that's my mental block, right? So listen, a good weekend of eating food and enjoying some desserts and stuff like that. I walk around about 282, 285 right now, right? It's not hard to be 299 by Monday. Water retention, food, calorie bounce back from a deficit and stuff like that. Like you said, holding a deficit for a long time is like stretching that elastic, and there's a quick pullback the moment
Yep.
you reintroduce calories. So reintroducing calories slowly is very important. All kinds of stuff that way. That's if we're in control, right? So for me, the 300 pounds is that, okay, that's it. We're not doing that. Another thing I do, I don't know if you've been on my Facebook, but I do a lot of daily progress shots where I'm in the gym with no shirt on, down in my underwear, with my pants around my ankles, and I take progress pics. And I tend to do that every day. And I do that because I want to attain a certain physique. But I do that every day to make sure that, hey, tomorrow morning you're taking your shirt off and you're pulling your pants down around your ankle, and you're taking a
Right.
picture and you're posting it on Facebook. So I created some big accountability steps that will keep me under control,
Makes
make
sense.
me aware of what I'm doing and stuff. And I still do want to do my very first bodybuilding show. I've never done one. I've competed in powerlifting and that kind of stuff, and I love it, but I've always wanted to do a bodybuilding show. So when I got down to that 269 a couple of years ago, one of the roadblocks I ran into that I knew, but I didn't expect it to be as big a deal was the loose skin.
Right.
So loose skin around the abdominals and the lower back. Um, I looked really good everywhere else, but when I took the shirt off, I saw that. And I knew it would happen, but it really bothered me. It really, really bothered me. Like actually, it was one of the biggest hurdles I ran into at that time. But then I turned it around into well, that's what you did to yourself, right? So at the end of the day, look at that and realize, what you did not come without a cost. So am I going to work with it? I'm going to figure out something and stuff like that. And I went through a business partnership that didn't work out well. There was a lot of stress. There was a lawsuit and stuff. I still train, but I ate a little bit more. So I got back into the 300s pretty quick again. But I caught myself sooner, realizing that I can't let this happen. Right. I was being tested again.
Right.
So I need to step back into it and deal with it and stuff. And as I got back into shape again, and now, like I said, I'm back into the 280s. I look even better. I feel I'm holding more muscle than I've ever held. So I'm loving it. But at the same token, I'm still really aware that I still have this goal of wanting to step on stage as a bodybuilder. So I need to keep working towards that. And I need to remind myself of doing that every day. And then I'll just get to the point where I'll have some skin removal surgery. I'm going to do that. I'm going to plan for that. Again, right? The struggle, persevere, succeed, and inspire. Well, that's the next formula to work on. Raise the money to do it, get the operation done, pick a meet, like keep committing to a higher and higher level all the time. And I know by now, this is the other thing too, is when you start to have success and really start to become who you really want to be and are meant to be, you realize that it's going to be hard work. But then you start to realize that hard work is a good amount of hard work. That hard is a good hard. And on the other side of that are wonderful things that you will never experience until you get to the other side of that. So I use that a lot to remind myself, hey, the journey is very important. And getting to the other side is going to be incredibly rewarding, but I'm never going to get those rewards for myself if I don't get to the other side of the next thing.
That makes sense. So you brought up the fact that you go all the way down to like the 260s area,
Yeah.
and then you regain. Did you decide to stop at 260, or was the regain more part of the stress?
That was just stress. A lot of things went sideways hard on me. I didn't expect a couple of these things. And it just reminded me that at the end of it, I was human and I still had to find a way to deal. So I wasn't going to go back to drinking. That's a non-negotiable. So what happened was I just, the hell with it. I'm gonna have some Oreos,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. What's a liter of ice cream? It's been so long. And you're right. If I would have stopped there, 2 days later, it would have been fine. But let's do it again. Let's do it again. There's some leftovers, right? Those
Yeah.
habits come back. And sometimes we just get to the point where we just need a break. We need a break mentally. We need to feel good. And we're going to chase that dopamine hit and stuff. And that's the reality of being human. But also, it's a reminder of that we're always going to run into some things that are going to do this to us. So the key is to create a life for ourselves that limits those possibilities of happening. No one lives a life stress free. That doesn't happen. But if we can sit there and make better choices of who we associate with, if we make better choices of what we do for a business, if we do better choices of what we do for pastimes that don't negatively impact us, right? We reduce the risk of having unneeded stress. But ideally, my goal is to keep getting better and become more and more stoic so that when things do go sideways, I'm physically and mentally able to handle it at a higher level because I'm operating at a higher level and then I'm holding myself to the higher standards. So one of the other exercises I like to do is we've all heard about, the term, what would Jesus do? No, I'm not referring to myself as the Messiah, but what I'm doing is when we're 398 pounds, right? We understand what 398 pounds as a person does on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
What we don't understand is what does a 250-pound version of Kurt do, right? So what I started to do was project forward, saying, okay, a 250-pound version of Kurt is not going to happen by accident. A 250-pound version of Kurt that's lean and jacked and has abs and is powerful is obviously going to do a different daily activity than I do now. That version of me is going to think about things differently. That version of me is going to do things differently. That version of me is going to have a different set of standards that I don't possess today. So, what are those standards? What could they be? What would they look like? Right. And then my goal was once I tried to figure, I think it would be this, start to adopt them right away, start to live by them right away. And that really helped accelerate a lot of things. A 250-pound version of me, right, doesn't miss workouts. A 250-pound version of me always has food ready in the fridge. A 250-pound version of me is able to have a conversation that's uncomfortable with someone for the sake of having a strong and productive conversation to avoid more stress down the line. So mental as much as physical, it was to try to figure out what this ultimate version of me would look like and how they would handle 9 a.m. in the morning, how they would handle 7 o'clock at night. And I think that's the thing that we have to really look at is that, we talk about the circle of five and who we spend our time with. We become the average of that. But if we look at achievers, and we've all done that, who's achieving at the highest level in an area that we want to achieve in, right? We study them. Well, they do things a certain way, right? They think a certain way. They get up at a certain time. They go to bed at a certain time. So it was a lot of that is like, I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I had to start to try to figure out what that would be, what the ultimate version of me, the heroic version of me would look like, but what that heroic version of me would think and handle situations internally and externally.
I love that. That's awesome. Just basically trying to project who you want to become and then like pretend you're that person until
Reverse
you're
engineering.
there. That's great.
Yeah,
I actually
it is.
really like
Yeah.
that. So, one of the things that's hard, and I think you brought this up when you're losing, 100 plus pounds, is knowing, where to stop. I
Yeah.
think that could be hard for a lot of people. You said you're shooting somewhere around 250 is kind of the thing you're throwing out there.
That's what I was thinking of when I was hitting for that 269 based on the body fat I was still holding and things like that. I kind of figured if I stepped on stage in a bodybuilding show, I'd be around 240, 250 at the
Mhm.
time. So I used that as a guideline, but I also was, hey, listen, if it means I got to go down to 232 to have the leanness I need to look good on stage, or will I get there at 258? I'll let that happen. I'll let that dictate it. I won't sit there and this isn't the number no matter what. It was more of, as my physique would change, what would that number look like, and what would I have to continue to do beyond that overall? Now, where I'm at right now with my training and how I'm doing things, I'm actually holding more muscle now than I did 3 years ago. So that number probably more like 260 again. The 260 today would look a lot more muscular than the 260 3 years ago because I
Right.
spent 3 more years bodybuilding, 3 more years doing volume training, 3 more years of eating better, right? So that has a cumulative effect as well.
Yeah. So this is something that I think is really important too, is it I think a lot of times these really structured things and things like numbers and scales, body composition can be a really good way to create like change. And they're very easy to measure and keep you in check. Sometimes those things can be hard long term and even kind of run into problems long term, right? You're pointing to your head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what have you done up to this point to, you know, make sure you keep yourself mentally safe? Because focusing too much on the scale or focusing too much on physique, these things can
Right.
cause
Right.
long-term issues. So what are you doing to counterbalance and make sure you're not just switching like, overeating for, being so hyper focused on nutrition or does
Yeah,
that
yeah,
make sense?
undereat or become anorexic or something crazy like that. Because again, we talked one ism can be exchanged for another ism. Um, I I have a coach. I have my own coach that is more of what I call like a CEO personal development coach
Hmm.
that I work with, and very, very good relationship. Been with him for a long time. Um, he's able to have very real conversations with me and stuff like that. He's good at I trust him enough, and that's the thing. It's trust. I trust him so much that I'm willing to hear what has to be heard, and how I handle it is obviously going to be on me and stuff like that. So again, as I got further along, I realized that I too need someone to work with. I too need someone to be accountable to. I have a wonderful wife. I have amazing kids. I go to church. These are very powerful things for me, right? But as I want to go further and as I start to deal with things that are deeper, darker, harder, I just need another level of support somehow. So this is what I've incorporated in the last year. It's allowed me to go more next level on things overall. The other thing too is going back to that self-love and understand that I have to forgive the old version of me. That old version of me was necessary to get here. But at the
How
same
did you
token,
do that? How did you forgive yourself?
honestly, I have conversations. I do a lot of writing and journaling and stuff like that. This is some of the guidance I work with my coach and stuff. And, so if we go back to what I talked about earlier about the world will, see us based on how we present ourselves to it. So if I look at some of the issues I had on certain areas, even 10 years ago when I was at that body weight and stuff, there's interactions that happen to me interpersonal wise with different people, business and stuff like that, that for the longest time, it was easier to blame them, blame outwardly and stuff like that. Now, there were some things that, there was some outward blame for sure. But the issue was the version of me is basically what allowed that to happen, right? That version of me back then that was weaker mentally, that was overweight, that couldn't stand himself physically, mentally, and emotionally and stuff like that. That version of me is what I was presenting. And I allowed the world to treat me that way because I was treating myself that way, right? So on some of the stuff that I'm working on now, uh, it's about going back and understanding that guy did the best he could under those circumstances, and it's okay. And I forgive that person. I understand that person. I love that person that I was, but I understand that it's because I was different back then that things were different for me. And how it always comes down to how we end up thinking about ourselves, right? So what I've really done is try to take all this change I've done, all this physical change and all this mental change and stuff to do it in such a way that it prepares me and builds me up to be that version of myself that I've always wanted to be, that superhero version for myself. The guy that's coming to save myself is me, nobody else, right? No one else can do it. Even if they want to, they can't really help you until you're willing to help yourself. We all know that when we work with people and stuff like that, is that, I can give you all the information, I can give you all the support, but if you're not ready to take the action, there's only so much I can do for you, right? So it's the same for myself. It's just that that version of me can never exist again, but I'm living a life that that version of me doesn't exist anymore. So that's really it. And so a lot of conversations with myself, a lot of writing. I do a thing now where I sit there and I look at a scenario that happened. And then if I don't like how it happened or it didn't go as well as it should, I go and I have a separate journal that I write. Well, how would the 250-pound version of Kurt handle this? What would he think? What would he say? What would he have done? Right? Would it even have bothered him? Like that's the kind of stuff. And I go back daily on that stuff and I write it and I rewrite the story so that I understand how I would have liked to handle it better for me. And then, so if it arises again, I feel like I've studied for it. I feel like I've prepared myself for it, right? So through all the changes that we all go through when we achieve these amazing transformations, the physical part of training, like we said, there's a lot of things that are going to be similar. The nutritional part, there's going to be, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's carnivore or South Beach or whatever it is. It's understanding your calories and working within them and finding the way you like to eat that works for you, that you can control those things. That's it. But it's really about the internal process. It's really about restructuring ourselves, how we think, how we feel, and just saying, hey, listen, this didn't work. So make some changes, right? The definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what we get stuck in, right? I ate really well on Monday. I exercised on Tuesday, but I went batshit crazy again Wednesday through Sunday, right? Well, the reality is we didn't do enough. We didn't do it. We did 2 days worth, 2 days out of 7. It's not going to get us anywhere in anything. So that's the hard work. And that's the setting things up mentally and saying, okay, well, this is my job. This is what I got to do.
Right. I love a lot of things that you've said. Um, One thing I always love to highlight is when we go through these things, there's a certain amount of wisdom that just comes from having to try things and things going
Yeah.
wrong. What were some of your biggest mistakes that you had to overcome and, maybe change from what you thought it was going to be during this process?
I think the biggest issue I used to think is I had a lot of time. I thought, yeah, I can deal with that. I'll fix that. I'll clean it up next week. I'll deal with that. You know, I'm 30. I got time. I'm 40, right? I think it was really that sitting there saying that, I'll get to it. There's lots of time left. I can fix this, when I really need to and stuff. I can out cardio this. That was, we run into that a lot. Or I'll just go down to, 1100 calories for 3 days and everything will be all right and stuff like that. And the reality is those are short-term things that work a little bit and they give us a false sense of, hey, this is going to work long term. It's not, because it's not sustainable, right? And then we beat ourselves up and then we fail. And then when we fail, we're like, oh, there we go. See, nothing works. Well, we just weren't consistent, right? So I think at the end of the day, for me, it was um, I have a lot of time and the self-confidence, just sitting there and saying I can't do it, just believing deep down that no matter what I want, having this underlying feeling that I'm that one guy who just can't pull it off. And the reality is if one person can do it, anybody can do it.
Right. I really like that. I think we're going to get pretty close to wrapping up. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on or talk about before we go?
No, like I said, I honestly think the biggest thing, if that's made a big difference for me personally, is really sitting down and thinking about who do I truly want to be? What version of me? When I look in the mirror, who do I want to see looking back at me? Mentally, physically, emotionally, and being very honest with that. And I think if we can do that, we have first, most people don't even think about what to do on Friday, right? They don't think that far ahead. We get busy, we let things come at us, we fill our day with all kinds of nonsense and drama and busyness so that we don't have to have these thoughts. I think that's the big thing. We shy away from it. But I think if anyone wants to make a real transformation, when they're there, it's to sit down with themselves and have that honest conversation take out a pen and paper and start to write some of these things down and just sit there and, I no longer want to be this. I want to be this, but then start to write down, well, why do I want to be this? The why. The why is super powerful. The bigger the why, the more we're going to weather the challenges and stuff. And I think anyone that's sitting here listening to this on the bubble that wants to make that transformation, wants to, truly change, that's the big exercise. That's the sit down, undisturbed, quiet, be ready to get emotional, be ready to be honest with yourself. Understand you might have to sit down a few hundred times as you do this, but that initial one to sit down and just think, who do I want to be? Who do I truly want to be? Who was I meant to, whatever way you want to form it and stuff like that. What what would inspire me if I saw me in that version and stuff? And I think if we can do that, or as soon as we do that, things change because then the answers are all apparent. The hows reveal themselves, right? Like you said, the knowledge is there. It's deciding that this is who I want to be. And once we come to that decision and that why is so powerful, and then we hold ourselves honestly to that standard every day, it happens.
And I love that. Thank you so much for ending on that. I don't think I can leave on any higher note than that, so we'll just wrap it up there. Kurt, thanks again for coming on the show. Thanks for all of our listeners for tuning in today, and we'll just stop there.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.